neither nor the Hamas leader is ready for a truce. Amir Tibon is a diplomatic correspondent for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, and he joins us now from Haifa, Israel. Amir, it is good to see you. And news today about the bodies recovered, the 6 Israelis who were taken hostage on October 7th, just more salt on a wounded country, knowing that perhaps they could have been saved, at least some of them, months ago. Again, the onus is on Hamas. They can release the hostages, and they should release the hostages now, and this would end. But to the point that you're making, I'm just reminded of something that Prime Minister Netanyahu said, and that others in the government responded with a lot of concern and criticism, and that is that these hostages are suffering, but they're not dying. And some in his own government said, no, they're not suffering, they are dying. And when you hear the news that these families received today, the nephew of one of these hostages, Avraham Munder, his nephew said, I don't want more bodies. Body retrievals don't impress me. There are live people for whom Israel isn't doing the maximum it can to rescue them, to put it lightly. Why should more families get the same news as I did? It's incomprehensible. There are people alive there now. Amir, just walk us through the tension now internally within the country and within this own government about the urgency of reaching a deal now.
Well, I will start by saying that for me, this is a very personal issue because the community that I'm a member of, a small community located on the border with Gaza, we still have 2 of our neighbors held by Hamas, who were kidnapped in front of their families on October 7. Omri Miran and Tzachi Idan, both of them fathers of young children who saw them being taken away by the terrorists on October 7, and now 10.5 months we're waiting. And of course, the news today is terrible because all of the 6 bodies that were returned to Israel today by the IDF, these are the bodies of people who were taken into Gaza by Hamas alive on October 7. These are not people who were murdered and then kidnapped as dead bodies. These are people who were alive October 7 and were alive in November when the first hostage release deal happened. And some of them were alive as late as January, February, and March. This is according to information that Israel has. They could have been saved. There could have been a deal to bring them back alive, and instead they are coming back in caskets. So just to frame the urgency of doing a deal right now. Now, this urgency is very clear to the majority of the Israeli public. We've seen public opinion polls that most Israelis want a deal right now because they understand it's the only way we can get people back alive. Military operations have brought us until now 7 living hostages and more than 20 dead bodies. We want more living hostages and less dead bodies. We need a deal. And we also know that most of the Palestinians in Gaza would support the deal that is being discussed right now because it would lead to an end of the hostilities, or at least a very long break, weeks, months without fighting, and everybody is suffering. Now, we have a problem with 2 people who are not as eager and don't feel the urgency. First one is Yahya Sinwar, leader of Hamas. We're talking here about an ultra-religious, messianic religious fanatic, and he's waiting for a regional war to break out. He believes that just around the corner is another escalation in which Iran and Hezbollah will rain thousands of missiles and rockets on Israel. And what he began on October 7, the massacre that his men conducted in southern Israel, will become an all-out regional war that will put basically the entire Middle East in flames. That's his vision. He's waiting for it to happen. It is very important that the Biden administration is trying to de-escalate with Israel, Iran, and Hezbollah, because every passing day without an Iran or Hezbollah massive attack on Israel, Sinwar's fantasy gets pushed back a little bit. The other actor who is problematic is Prime Minister Netanyahu. And what he's doing is his classic move of doublespeak. And he's been doing this for years. He says one thing in English to American audiences and American diplomats and to President Biden and Secretary Blinken. And then he says the opposite in Hebrew. Members of his cabinet, including the far-right ultra-religious elements that he relies on to hold power, and to his supporters. And he tells Blinken the other day, we're really ready to make a deal. And then he meets with some of his supporters and says, actually, we're not going to give up A, B, C, and D, basically making a deal impossible. And between Sinwar's ultra-religious messianic fantasies and Netanyahu's political interests, we are stuck and lives are hanging in the balance.
Amir, there's a lot to digest in terms of what you just said there, but I think I want to start by saying thank you so much for keeping the memories of the two neighbors that you had on your kibbutz alive. I remember what you went through on October 7th and what you lived through and the horrors that you saw, and it gives me nightmares reliving it for me, and I didn't even experience it. I only heard about it secondhand through you. Just in terms of the ceasefire negotiations, I mean, as much as we talk about the incremental advancements and movements in terms of the ceasefire, we of course do have to remember that there are real people, real hostages and real lives at stake in all of this. You talk about the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been caught in double speak, talking to the American audience and saying one thing in English, another thing in Hebrew. Just walk us through how Israelis are putting pressure on him. I mean, obviously, a lot of people have said, listen, at the end of the day, they do not believe that Netanyahu deeply and truly actually wants a deal. So how are people putting pressure on him? And what do you think the right way is for them to put pressure on him?
Well, first of all, I will add another sentence about Sinwar. The most effective pressure on him is that Israel is getting closer to him militarily. The IDF is in Gaza, and some of his comrades have been assassinated, and he knows he's next. And at the same time, it's very important that the Biden administration, like I said, is keeping his fantasy about an all-out regional war from actually becoming true. With regards to Netanyahu, there is internal pressure here with demonstrations, and the families of the hostages are leading those demonstrations and are demanding him make a deal. But he doesn't need the families of the hostages to stay in power. In order to stay in power, he needs his far-right, ultra-nationalist allies. They are against a deal right now, and as long as he needs them and they give him their support and they're against the deal, he's choosing his coalition time and again. And he has great excuses, because he says, how can we make a deal with Hamas after what they did? How can we give up any of the military achievements that we acquired during the war? These are not things that should be completely ignored. I don't think it's that simple, 1 or 0. But at the end of the day, it's really not deal or not. And the hostages are dying there. We are losing them every passing day. And if there are not hard choices and hard compromises made, they will keep dying there. And also the suffering of people in Gaza will continue. Mm-hmm. And right now, like I said, we have these two, I don't want to call them leaders, because they're not showing leadership, but people in positions of power who are not leading us in that direction.
Yeah, and it's really telling now in the past few weeks what's come to light, where you have the defense and security establishment saying now is the time for a deal, and that they will continue, Israel is ready to continue to put military pressure on Hamas, and the U.S. also putting pressure on Hamas, on Sinwar, as you just noted, while also being able right now to focus on bringing these hostages home and putting a ceasefire in place. Amir Tibon, thank you. Yes.
If I can add one sentence, as a journalist, I understand that the chances are extremely low. And at the same time, as someone who's personally connected, I do want to ask President Biden and Secretary Blinken not to give up, to keep pushing, to keep trying, because without them, we don't have anyone pushing for this right now.
President Biden has said he is committed. He is committed. This is one of his top priorities in the 5 months that he has remaining in office, to getting this deal done, to seeing the war come to an end and these hostages come home alive. Reminder that 5 of them are American citizens as well. Amir Tibon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Amir.
Thank you.